All right, so you're going to the frying pan or the tailor, or maybe the blue, and you want to learn to tie a Mysis shrimp pattern. This is a super simple one I came up with, gosh, years and years ago. This fly might be 25 years old now, maybe even older. This is called a Charlie's Mysis. Originally, I tied this on a Tiemco 9300, and I've since changed it to, oh, surprise, Tiemco 100 SPBL. Either one of those hooks is fine. They're both stouter wire hooks than a fine wire dry fly hook, but about the same shape. And one of the reasons I like that heavier wire hook is because all I catch are big giant fish all the time, every time I go. So I like to use that little bit heavier wire hook. I hope you do too. So I'm going to start on this with some white 8/0 unithread. And I'm going to start this thread just up here behind the eye. I'm just going to dress the shank from front to back, all the way back to the bend, and then bring the thread back up to just behind the eye. So I've just dressed the shank and covered the shank with a layer of thread. Now this Mysis is an imitation of a live Mysis, and one of the most striking things about a live Mysis shrimp in the water is it's pretty transparent. It's just got a little bit of opaqueness to it. And through complete happenstance, I discovered that old school white egg yarn works perfectly for this. So I'm going to take, I've got just a clump of this cut here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to do it all on the screen here. So I'm going to peel just a few fibers off the corner of this clump and kind of start to roll them in my fingers. So you can see I'll just roll my fingers and draw out a strand, like so. And kind of roll my fingers down. I like to have a little dubbing wax on my fingers just so it is a little easier to get a hold of. So I've got a strand like this. So I'm going to cut that tapered end off. I'll come in and I'm going to tie this to the hook just up here behind the eye and wrap back over it all the way back to the bend. Now the dubbing that I use for this, and when I first came up with this fly, I did the egg yarn for the abdomen. Mysis shrimp is not a scud; it's more like krill, if you're familiar with that shape. So it's got kind of a long abdomen and a short thorax area. And I was trying to find a dubbing that was flat, matte finish, not shiny. And oh, look at that! Egg yarn is flat, matte finish. So I'm going to take some of this and just cut this up into about 1/8 long chunks. And I'll peel a little clump of that off, and you can just sort of stir that up in your palm. So you've got a little clump of dubbing. So as you're seeing here, a package of white egg yarn will tie about 174 million of these. So I'm going to take a little pinch of this dubbing. And again, I'm not worried about dubbing this down super tightly. I'm going to pick this out after the fact. So I'm going to dub it onto the thread. You do want to make sure your hands are clean with any kind of white or light colored dubbing. If you've got grubby fingers, it's going to rub off on the dubbing. Get that all on there. There we go. And I'm going to start to wrap this dubbing back here at the bend. I'm just going to build a fairly level thorax up this shank, right up to behind the hook eye. I'm going to leave myself just a bit of room behind the hook eye and make a little thread base there. So just kind of an elongated thread head. Now for the eyes, I'm going to use a single strand of small black round rubber legs. And I'm going to tie this in up here behind the hook eye like spinner wings. So I'm going to catch it with a couple of turns, one stacked right over the top of the other, and then I'm going to turn it. Let me move this back just a bit here. Didn't quite catch it where I want it. Then I'm going to turn and pull the front end back toward me and complete a couple of X wraps. And you can finish a couple more out just to get them at a right angle to the hook. A few turns of thread behind those eyes, come up in front, and then whip finish. Trim your thread out. Now I'm going to pull these two strands up and just trim them off short. So I've got two little black eyes that show up on top there. The body I'm going to trim at about 1 inch long. I usually leave them a little long. I can always trim them a little bit, trim them a little more to length on the water, and I very often do end up doing that. But I usually leave them long to start with. Sometimes you'll get Mysis that are a little bit bigger than other times. So then I'm going to take a dubbing brush and I'm going to pick some of that dubbing out along the bottom. Try to get that on both sides, and you can see why I cut that dubbing so short. I don't want real long legs. I just want them to kind of feather out there. And then I'll take my scissors and I'm going to trim the top flat. So no legs on top, obviously. I'm going to shorten that eye down just a bit. Just short little stubs is all we need to get those two little black dots. Kind of roll that body up a bit. Now, if you wanted to imitate the presence of an egg sac in there, sometimes they do have a little spot of orange in the middle. I don't know if that's an egg sac or if it's their guts or what exactly it is, but sometimes, right somewhere right about here in the middle, they'll have a little orange spot. What I would do there is when I built that first thread base and then dubbed my thread, before I wrap the dubbing, I would take an orange marker and just make an orange band around the center of the hook on that white thread base, and that'll show through on the finished fly. I'm going to go get this one wet and I'll bring it back and show you what this fly looks like when it's wet. It's a perfect spitting image of a live Mysis shrimp. The dead Mysis shrimp are very white, the live ones are pretty transparent, and that's what I had in mind when I was tying this one up. So stand by, I'll be right back. So here's our Mysis shrimp after he's been wetted. You can see he's fairly translucent, transparent, sort of a milky imitation there. That extended body sort of becomes one piece. I got some random dubbing there attached to my vise, but you can kind of get the idea of what we're after there. You do get a little bit of movement out of that tail in the current. I very often find these shrimp just barely under the surface. Love sight fishing with them. You can catch some really big fish, and man, when I first came up with this fly before it became popular and everybody else knew what it was, I absolutely cleaned house on the frying pan. Just bananas, and it still works to this day. It's still one of the most popular patterns out there. Super simple, super cheap, super quick. Catches big fish. Yeah, what else you want? There you go.